Good evening and welcome to Addiction Talk. And as always, we have a very special guest tonight. I remember her story. And when you see the story of my guest today and how far she's come and how she is making an impact for all of those people who are struggling with addiction, it is inspiring. Take a listen to Tara's story. Tara Connor was 8 months into her reign as Miss USA 2006 when she tested positive for cocaine and made headlines for underage drinking. At risk of losing her crown, Tara was given a second chance and went to rehab. However, well before the public scandal, Tara's hidden struggles with substance use began in her early teens after experiencing several painful events, including her parents' divorce, the death of her grandfather, and a sexual assault. Today, Tara has found beauty in recovery and is a recovery advocate, TV personality, actress, and life coach with over 16 years of sobriety.
That this disease does not discriminate, and that even Miss USA can have an addiction.
Addiction Talk starts now. Such a powerful story, and I'm glad to welcome Tara Connor.
Hi.
More about her story. Good to see you tonight, Tara.
Good to see you. Thank you so much for having me.
You know, Tara, as I was looking back at the video we did, I remember, I don't even know how old I was then, but I remember that press conference when all of that came to light. When you see that and you think about where you were at that moment in your life, what pops up for you?
Oh, wow. I remember at the time I was 20 years old, right before the press conferences when I turned 21. So in my opinion, I was still very much a child. It was a nerve-wracking experience and not one that I think a lot of people could come out of unscathed. And it was also during a time when the stigma of addiction was very alive. So my experience wasn't, oh, thoughts and prayers, bless her heart, God bless her. It was being like a witch at the Salem witch trials, having stones thrown at me for being a bad role model. And I'm just trying to stay alive at this point in my life. So it was a very hard, necessary, but hard experience that completely changed my life.
So there you are, you know, it comes out that you've been struggling with cocaine. And for the public, this was like, what's
Right.
going on? But for you, this was something that had been going on for years.
Right. Yeah. I think the assumption was that, oh, she won Miss USA and then she lost her marbles living in New York City and small town girl in the big city, whatever. My addiction started when I was 14 years old. As most addicts, their addiction starts in adolescence. And to some, they would call me a functioning addict just because I could show up and go to work and perform, if you will. But it was more of self-medication, which I later realized once I went through the treatment process. But you know, my addiction had been a very significant part of my life, and it kept me alive for several years. As crazy as that sounds, I found refuge in my addiction until I didn't.
So you're 14 years old when you first started experimenting with drugs. Did anybody realize? How were you able to continue? Because I know you were on the pageant circle at that time. How were you able to continue and do that? Did anybody realize anything was going on?
I'm from a very small town, Russell Springs, Kentucky. And at the time, you know, we had less than 3,000 people in our population and 2 whole stoplights. It was a dry town at the time, so they didn't sell alcohol, church on every corner. Everyone knew everything. So I had a pretty good idea of what having a bad reputation looked like, just because small town people talk. You're trying to keep up with the Joneses, blah, blah, blah. And boy, did I give them things to talk about. But I don't know. I completely lost track of what your question was because I have mom brain.
No, hey, that's okay. I know you have a new 7-month-old and I've heard that happens, but we were talking about, you know, going through that time, being 14, but still being on the pageant circuit.
Thank you.
recognize that you were even struggling?
No, I think that when it started, people didn't realize that I was struggling with addiction because, again, it was self-medicating. Like when I would go to school, I later was diagnosed with ADHD as a 30-year-old woman. This was 7 years ago, but I struggled with that. So it made sense that I chose to take uppers during school because I could focus. And then I had such a terrible panic disorder that I took downers and opiates because it was more of a flat feeling where I didn't feel anything. It started to get ugly. It was always ugly. Anyone that has dealt with addiction knows what goes on behind closed doors. I believe my mom had an idea that things were going on because I was getting in trouble in school. Like it wasn't like this huge secret. I got drunk in detention and almost got arrested when I was 15, I think. And then 16, I was popped with having Percocets in my purse. And my mom at the time trying to do what she thought would be the most helpful thing to me, because I had titles. I was Miss Kentucky Teen USA at the time. And usually you would lose your title for something like that if you're arrested. So she begged the school system, please don't arrest her. Please don't put her in jail or juvie or anything like that. So I got away with everything. I never really suffered severe consequences. And I also lived a life that was very private to me. I didn't let people in on the things that weren't going well in my life because I feel like when I was younger and tried to let people in on what wasn't going well in my life, it was met with blinders and, earmuffs where people didn't want to take action when I was suffering. So, I think a lot of kids that grow up in any home knows what it looks like when their parents aren't well. And my parents were absolutely kids raising kids, obviously doing the best that they could. But open communication wasn't a big thing there. I have substance abuse that runs in my family. My mom was a severe codependent. She's a recovering codependent, thank God. I was taught it wasn't don't do these things. It was more about don't let people see you doing these things. Because again, growing up in a small town, people talk. And so I just didn't have a safe place to let people know I'm not well. I was very good at hiding it.
So when the whole controversy happened, when you tested positive as Miss USA for cocaine, do you feel that was kind of a cry for help for you? Or do you feel, were you at any point finally somebody seeing it? Or what was going through your mind at that time?
So I think I was angry more than anything because the way that I ended up getting caught was one of my friends at the time. She was Miss Teen USA. Sorry, my baby doesn't feel well, so you might hear some cries here and there. Miss Teen USA at the time turned me in over a misunderstanding. So she called the boss and said, Tara's doing cocaine and and she was doing that in an effort to hurt me. I don't always think that our angels are dressed as angels. But I had learned over the years to just defend, constantly defend, only survive, only survive, only survive. I became a chameleon in every situation, and I only knew how to present what I thought you needed me to be because it kept you at bay. So, I was abused by an uncle when I was 3 years old, and I opened my mouth at 3 years old and nothing was done. So I was taught early on that I had to protect myself. And so even when I'm being met with my own actions, if you gave me an inch, I could take it for a mile. And I know that a lot of addicts can relate to that, where, if I wasn't completely blowing up my life, then you can't say anything to me. And my parents really couldn't say much because, it was, again, do as I say, not as I do. So I think I was relieved. I was angry, but I was relieved. I was just like, great, now I don't have to pretend. because I only knew how to pretend.
So if you were to compare your outward, public persona,
Mm-hmm.
what was really going on with Tara on the inside, how would they differ? Like what was going on in the inside versus what you were portraying? I know you said you were a chameleon and giving
Mm-hmm.
people what they wanted to see and hear, but what were you really feeling?
I mean, I can relate to the thought of wanting to go to sleep and not wake up at in early adolescence. So I really suffered with severe depression, and I used to have an anxiety that was so bad that if when I would wake up to go to school, I would throw up every morning because I just had this panic that lived within my body, because trauma lives in the body. So, and I'm just trying to navigate this very adult world that I'm living in with a mind of a child. And I think that I only knew how to prove people wrong. Like, I'll show you, like, I'm not, this hot mess that you think I am, or I'm not a bad kid, or I'm not trash, just, and I think everyone suffers from that in some way. Like, we're all trying to, I mean, God, look at Instagram, Facebook,
No, it's
we're
sad.
all trying to portray like how great we're
Like it's
doing.
perfect. Like everything's perfect.
Right. And my fear of looking bad almost killed me
Mm,
because I only knew how to put on a smile. Like, I could be whatever you needed me to be in any moment. And I did that because I needed you to love me.
mhm. Did
You
being in pageants make you feel loved? Like when you started doing those as you were dealing with, you talked about being sexually assaulted at 3 years old and then dealing with just your parents and things that they were facing.
Yeah.
Was the pageants an outlet for you to some extent?
I mean, truth be told, I hated pageants. I
Mm,
hated them because I just wasn't that girl, like, I've always been a little bit of a tomboy. What you see is what you get for the most part. But when it comes to pageantry at the time, I mean, especially in Kentucky in the South, it's like, it's a religion. So
mhm,
the people that I would be competing against were just God-fearing pageant patties. And I'm out back smoking a cigarette while the other girls are like gluing their swimsuits to their butts so it doesn't ride up.
mhm,
But my mom always kind of pushed me into it because the first pageant that I entered, I won. And then that state pageant that came after that, I won. And then the next pageant that I entered, I won. And so all of these experiences kind of became my alter ego, if you will, of, because there is, everyone thinks that pageant girls are these princesses that, poop gold. No way would they have a drug problem. So it was like the ultimate mask, it really just worked for me. And it took me places. I was seen by more people. I, would be able to get away from my job waiting tables for a moment to go model here and there, or like to go do Deal or No Deal while that was still on as like a contestant. Like, it was the ultimate mask. But I wouldn't say that it brought me joy. I think it fueled my ego more than it fueled my soul.
mm,
And that's tricky, because I think to overcome addiction, you kind of have to have an ego death.
mm.
And it's really hard to have that in your early 20s
So
over and
speaking of ego, when you're
over.
sitting there at the press conference and they decide to give you a second chance, they say,
Mhm.
"Okay, Tara, we know that you've been caught underage drinking. We know that you tested positive for cocaine, but we're going to give you a second chance. You can finish out your reign if you go to rehab." Did
Right.
you feel in that moment that you deserved a second chance?
It was kind of my idea. I mean, I went to, gosh, I really don't come at me, people. This is just my experience. But the day of the press conference, there were 2 weeks leading up to that where it was going to be a is she or isn't she situation. Like, is she going to be fired or is she going to keep her title? And they flew me into New York. I had to go meet with Donald Trump at the time, because he was the owner slash whatever of the organization. And I go to his office for my sit down. They have resignation papers there for me to sign because the Miss Universe organization really wanted me out, which whatever. But he's asking me, what do I do with this? You know, you're out there drinking, you're dancing on tables. I was a classy drunk. I did not dance on tables, but still. He's like, what am I supposed to do with this? And I said, well, you know, Mr. Trump, I think it would say far more about the organization and far more about your character if you helped me. And I'll turn this thing around. I'll be the best damn Miss USA you've ever seen. I spoke to him in his language. And he says, Trump saves Miss USA.
He said that as you were sitting there?
As I'm sitting there. Yeah. And then he goes, I like it. And so I went from being a story to a puppet. And on the way down to the press conference, I was told, like, bring on the tears. They love that. They eat that up. So my life became a press story instead of my life actually being on the line. So I'm going into recovery to look good, not because I'm dying, right? So I was just put into a role to play the part again. And my pride is truly what sustained me. Later, I was told that he was upset that I was in treatment because he wanted me to be out getting photographed, going to clubs, because that's what the famous girls were doing at the time, because this was the Lindsay Lohan, Nicole Richie, like Paris Hilton era where, you know, the bad girls got the most press and everyone loves press. And I did the opposite. I went to treatment and I cleaned up my act. And then, you know, they don't talk about that as much because it's boring. So the word on the street is, and I always reserve the right to be wrong, but word on the street is he was very upset and had some choice words for the president of the organization at the time for sending me to treatment.
But what I think is so crazy is on top of that, they said, when you go to the press conference, we need tears, like literally guiding you in some way.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, at the time I was just like, all right, I mean, I can kind of see that I'm being used as a story here, but I'll take it and run with it. You know, like I just didn't have a choice. I just like my life is completely bombed at this point. All of these people in my life that I've tried to prove wrong for all of these years, I proved them all right. And I just kind of showed up wherever they needed me to. And I said whatever they needed me to say. And I, you know, it's not normal for most people to go to treatment and then get out and have to do a media tour about your experience at 30 days sober.
Well, you know, like what's interesting about that, Tara, so you come out, you go to 30 days treatment, you come out and you're thrown immediately into the limelight. We already know anyone, you know, being American Addiction Centers, dealing with people who are struggling and coming out of that's a volatile time.
Yes.
Extremely vulnerable.
Extremely.
So how were you even navigating that?
Well, I had a lot of eyeballs on me at the time, you know, I mean, I don't know what it's like to be under a conservatorship, but I kind of do, you know, because the Miss Universe organization literally dictated every single move that I made and had eyes on me. Like they gave me a den mother that stayed in my apartment with me just to keep an eye on me, just so that I wouldn't like go do something crazy, I guess, which, I mean, you know, people don't understand addiction and how that works. What I needed to do was I needed to go to meetings. What I needed to do was go to aftercare. But I had a job to do, and the threat of losing it is why I left treatment at 30 days. I wanted to stay longer. But I just used the tools, man. I mean, I learned enough during my experience in treatment. I was given tools, and, you know, you hear about the toolbox all the time. And, you know, for me, what I believe is that ultimately treatment's great at getting you separated from your drug of choice or just getting you cleaned out, because I believe that when you have a clean mind, that's the only time that you have a choice in the matter. But I was given enough information about what it was that I was suffering from, and I bought into it enough to where I, would listen to this meditation tape before I would go to bed. And I would read out of, a 12-step book, or I would read daily affirmations. And I was doing all of this to myself. And what's funny is the den mother that they gave me, I actually ended up becoming this seed that planted for her recovery later on down the road, because I needed support and she was there. And so I would be like, this is what I learned about recovery, because there was something very magical about knowing, like, oh, wow, this is a mental illness. Like, this is a disease of the mind and the body. This isn't just me being an out of control teenager. I was ill, and I could tell such a significant difference in 30 days of just being willing. Like, just that mustard seed of willingness made everything different for me. It completely changed everything. So I think I had, again, a lot of angels kind of just walking around me, and they don't always have the nicest faces, but I've had little, breadcrumbs placed at my feet every step of the way, down to like
where to get you to where you are now. Because I remember reading something, Tara, that was really interesting, that said in those first years of recovery, you were kind of doing it to some extent out of spite. Like,
100%.
I'm going to prove to all of the people, all of the media, everyone who came at me, that I can do this. Was that true? I mean, I read that, but in your own words, is that how you felt? And when did it shift where you actually started doing it for you?
It shifted when I saw the true nature of my disease from a sober state. So I always, in treatment, I was taught, like, go to meetings, don't drink or use no matter what, hold on to your seat, like, play the tape back, like all of these slogans that can be very useful and helpful, but it was all about using and not using. And I think a lot of people misunderstand powerlessness and what unmanageability looks like in their life. And I believe that they think, oh, I took a drink of this and then I did some stupid stuff, right? But that's not the case. My mind started trying to self-soothe because my emotions are unmanageable. Like, I'm unmanageable on the inside. Like, I'm dying, literally dying. Like, it feels like an atomic bomb going off inside of my body, where all I can do is think of things outside of me that's going to put out this fire, right? That's what it feels like. I sometimes, to non-addicts, describe it as a breakup. Like, when you go through a breakup of someone that you really loved, there's this empty, sick pit in your stomach that will make you vomit. It will give you diarrhea. Like, it gives you physical symptoms. It's the same thing as a detox. And so what happens? We obsess of that person. What are they doing? Like, who are they talking to? You go on their social media, you go insane. Literally, it's an obsession that forms. And the only thing that's going to scratch that itch is talking to that ex, or the only thing that's going to scratch that itch is picking up. Well, I was told, don't use or drink no matter what. So what are my options? Because my life on the outside looked fantastic. Like, nothing was necessarily wrong. But emotionally, I couldn't control how I felt, and I couldn't control my thoughts. And it was getting very dark sober. It was getting the true bottom of my recovery happened at 8.5 years of sobriety, I call it. I believed, like a lot of people believe, like, oh, I'll go to meetings here and there. I'll be of service. Like, I'll share every now and then. And then I was made into this poster child for recovery. So I better know what I'm doing. I didn't know how to reach out and tell people, like, hey man, I'm dying on the inside and I don't know why, because I'm being referred to as an expert. And so it was I heard a friend of mine, everyone knows he's in recovery, but Steve-O, I heard him sharing one time, and he said, I got to the point where I couldn't save my face and my ass at the same time. And for some reason, it coming from him, I heard it differently. And I knew that what I looked like didn't matter because no one cares. At the end of the day, we all fear that people are thinking of us a certain kind of way. And those people that we're afraid are thinking of us a certain kind of way are to themselves thinking or fearing other people thinking of them a certain kind of way. Like we're all so afraid to be unabashedly ourselves. And I needed to have an experience sober where it was, you know, and for me, it was financial as well. Like, do I put gas in my car or do I eat an apple? Like it got, you know, life happens.
Is
like
that what you're saying, Tara, when you're talking about, because you said, which I think is so powerful, and I think somebody needs to hear this, because sometimes people think you go through the recovery, you know, you go through rehab and 30 days and you're cured. Oh, everything's perfect. And you said 8 years because there was still emotions. There was still like you talked about the atomic bomb being on the inside of you. And if you don't know what to do with that, you're literally dying. I mean, somebody needs to hear that. Yes. That's so
so
huge.
It's, you know, and I think when I say like, you know, you start to think of things outside of you that's going to make you feel whole in that moment. Right. So for me, like some of my like good old go-tos were like turning on Forensic Files and putting the covers over my head, or eating a whole box of Cocoa Puffs. That worked for a while. Or reaching out to an ex that was abusive, or not being able to eat because I'm so emotionally charged that I'm nauseous. Like the unmanageability presented itself with physical symptoms. I was losing weight. I was probably 100 pounds. I'm 140 right now. So I was 40 pounds lighter than I am now. I could not sleep. When I would wake up in the morning, I would think to myself, dear God, can you please just let me sleep a little while longer so that I don't have to feel this? And again, it's a very similar feeling to some gnarly breakups that I've had. You know, it's like that.
But how did you get out of it? Because I hear the feelings and I can relate to that, you know, going through some breakups. Girl, I've been through some breakups. So I can relate to that feeling that you're talking about. But how did you get yourself out of that? How did you shift to where you are now? Because you're 16 years. So the second half, girl, we have like, you know, a new life. It's almost like a new beginning. So how did you shift out of that place?
This is probably the most important thing that I think I can say. And it's kind of wrapping up where this started. You hear things like go to meetings, get a sponsor, do the steps, blah, blah, blah. Most people in recovery, and I work in recovery, so I see this a lot, put the plug in the jug, they put down the pipe or the needle, they go to a few meetings, they just white knuckle because they don't need to do the steps. They don't need to do what all of these other people do, right? Or they don't need to take direction from someone because I'm grown and I know what I'm doing. But we all have that little voice inside of us that tells us the truth. And we always try to pat it away by saying other stuff. Like mine would always be like, get a new sponsor and do the steps. And then I would be like, I need to go to yoga or get a sponsor and do the steps. And be like, you know what? I just need to go on a clean diet. I just need to change my eating habits. And then I did all of these. I exhausted all of my options that I came up with because I think that I know what's going to fix me. And I'm the one that kills me on a daily basis. So I ended up following a girlfriend of mine because I couldn't be alone at the time because I was miserable. I followed her to a meeting on Skid Row, and it was a meeting of recovery. So everyone was welcome. And I heard a message of depth and weight. And it was a message that only the dying could hear. And it was a solution that only the dying could accept. And I think that this solution is told in rooms all around the world. But until you're in that real spot where the dying can hear, you don't hear it. And so for some reason that day I heard it. And I listened to that little voice in me that said, you need to get a new sponsor. You need to go through the work. So I got a new sponsor and I did absolutely everything that person told me to do. No matter how crazy it sounded to me at the time, I had to lay aside everything that I thought I knew so that I could have a new experience. And that really required me to have a death of everything that I thought I knew. I had to finally get to that place where I said, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe you
describe the beginning of your recovery, the first 8 years to the second 8 years.
So I don't really feel like I was in recovery until I asked that man to sponsor me. Yes, it was a man. This is very controversial, but I needed that. Like, I needed someone that when I called them with a feeling, he would be like, I don't care about your feelings. And he would hang up on me. Now, I know
Mm,
that sounds harsh. This man married, he officiated my wedding. He is family. He is the
mm,
one person that was able to get me to a relationship with God that has sustained me to this day.
mm,
I trusted everything that he said, and he allowed me to have my own experience with the work, not his experience or not the experience that other people say you're supposed to have. It's a personal journey. He gave me direction. I took the direction. I had an experience with it. So the change happened when I finally decided that I didn't know what was going to be best for me. Like,
mm,
yoga wasn't fixing. I didn't have the power to do better than that. That's the thing. Like, everyone has this idea that they can do better. Like, oh, I'll just start going to the gym, or I'll go back to school, or I'll get a new job. I just need to make more money. But
mm,
they can't. If they could do that, you would already
mm,
be doing it. So if you're coming out of treatment saying, I'm going to go out and do all of these things, and getting additional care is not at the top of that list, you're not going to do any of that, because you're only going to go back to doing what you know how to do, because you lack the power to do better than that.
mhm.
So I had to learn how to gain access to a power. I think people hear the word God and they're just like, it's religion. Ah! But it's not that. It's just we can't fix anything until we know what's broken, right? So
Mm,
I'm not going to know that I need help setting an alarm to get up 5 minutes early until I accept the fact that I can't wake myself up on time. I'm just not a timely person.
mhm,
And so when I can identify these struggles,
mhm,
or go deeper than that, I can't not cheat on a partner. I
mm,
can't not have sex without a condom. These are very real things that people do. How many of us have done dumb things in our lives and said, but I said I'd never do that again. I
mm,
learned my lesson. I didn't want to do that. It's because we lack power.
mm.
We get stuck in this cycle of believing that we can pull ourselves out of the depths of hell, but we're the ones that got us there.
Mm.
And we think that we know how we're going to do it by eating
Mary,
healthy.
you're like preaching to us today. I feel like we're getting a whole message. I mean, but this is so needed.
It is, because there's a lot of fluff out there when it comes to recovery. But I had to see that I was going to die from a sober state. I had to see that I was going to die doing things to find comfort,
Mhm,
things outside of me to find comfort, to make me feel whole on the inside, whether it was through food, money, him, her, the job. I used to
mm,
weigh my worth on the last television show that I did,
mm,
and that had the power to make me feel this big. And today, I don't need any of that.
mm,
My life is so fantastic. Like, whenever I have someone, if I give them direction, they ask me, like, why am I doing this? I'll be like, well, how free do you want to be? It's up to you.
mm,
At the end of the day, it's up to us. No, I have to be my why. I have to be the one that's going to self-motivate me every single day. And usually that comes after surrender. You can't think to yourself, okay, I surrender, I'm in acceptance, because that feels fine.
mhm,
Surrender hurts. It
mm.
feels like the toddler that didn't get the gum at the grocery store and they're throwing a fit. So you literally have to get into that fetal position. It's such a powerful position because it's the newness of it. It's like, I'm a baby. I need to learn, right? And then it's you feel like a doormat when you're going through it. No one wants to be told what to do. But God, I needed that. And
Mhm.
today I can tell myself what to do.
And
Yeah.
I wonder if you had not, Tara,
Oh,
gone
I
through
did.
all of this. I know people look and say, "Oh my God, you went through all of this." But
Mhm.
now there is beauty in the ashes of everything that you went through. And I know before we even got on this call, you were like, "I'm now a new mom too."
Mhm.
And even being able to experience that because of your recovery.
Yeah, I would not. That was the hardest thing that I've ever walked through. Like, I don't think a lot of people could survive a national scandal as a child, um, and come out of it unscathed or alive, for that matter. These days, it would be considered extreme bullying.
Mm,
Um, because everyone's real woke. But I, sobriety doesn't promise us that life is going to be easy. It just doesn't. It's not just going to, you're going to put the plug in the jug and everything's going to be better. No, it's not. Sobriety just offers me up power where I lacked it before.
Oh, that's
And
good.
I had, I had to go through those powerless moments to identify where I needed a little bit of extra tender love and care, where I needed to be humble enough to say, I don't know. I don't know the one pathway to recovery. I just know that what worked for me was being able to follow one program wholeheartedly. I don't care where you do it. I don't care if it's like a meditation group, if it's religiously driven, if it's an A and an A or another A or some other kind of A or whatever. They're all the same thing. But pick one, pick a modality and follow it like your life depends on it. And stop changing the rules. Don't try to reinvent the wheel. This stuff was created a long time ago. So all you got to do is follow some direction. I don't care if someone tells you to do 10 push-ups. That's why you get a trainer, because you got someone giving you direction so that you can get results.
Giving you that guidance.
Right.
And I think, it was huge that you said you surrendered, you found your why,
Right.
and now you're living a life
Mm-hmm.
that is bigger or greater than I can see the happiness, that's greater than your wildest dream. And so I just have a few last questions for you.
Okay.
Because when you look back,
Mm-hmm.
people, you talked about it, we would have said it was bullying,
Right.
for you right now, all
Right.
the things that people said about you.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think it's so important that we have role models who are not perfect?
Oh God. Well, because I say this in my TED talk. I keep doing this. I've got a hair in my nose and it's driving me crazy. I say in my TED talk that when I went through my media tour after coming out of treatment, that I had someone say, "Do you think you tarnished the crown?" And all I could say or see was that version of myself that had been molested by an uncle, lost a grandfather, parents are divorcing, life is not easy. I'm a teenager at this point, barely. I saw this man put a muzzle on Miss USA's mouth for being ill, for having a sickness. And I say this too, I was not a bad person trying to act good. I was a sick person that needed to be well. And if you look back then and you look back now, you can see a clear difference between wellness and unwellness. Recovery is not linear. It took a lot to get me to the place that I am today. It took a lot of me doing a lot that I didn't want to do, but I didn't have a choice. My life was on the line. So it's shameful. We need people to be able to make mistakes because that's what we do. We're human beings. You're going to make a mistake. I don't care how much money you have. I don't care if you're the president, if you're Miss USA, if you are Gandhi, if you are Mother Teresa, you're going to do something stupid because we're human. We have free will. We're going to do dumb stuff. That's how you learn. My daughter's going to do dumb things because she is a spirit that needs to learn some stuff. I can't teach her everything. They told me not to put my hand on the stove and you saw what happened.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to love each other. We have to be able to love people and meet them where they are, especially when they're unlovable, because that's when they need you the most.
Mm-hmm.
I needed that. I needed someone to love me. Mm-hmm. And now I have so many people that love me. It's amazing. Oh. Yeah.
And I know that little 7-month-old baby loves you too. She adores you. She hasn't said it yet, but I know she does. So one of my final questions I have for you, if somebody's struggling,
yes,
right now, and they are hearing your story tonight, Tara, if there were 1 to 2 pieces of wisdom that you would say to them in closing, what would that be?
Open your mouth. If you're struggling with something, you're not unique. You're not alone. There are going to be people out there that completely understand you, even though you feel very unique and that no one's going to understand, especially adolescents. Everyone needs a little bit of help sometime. There is no shame to that. And if you're a parent, I saw a question. If you're a parent and you have a teen that just doesn't want to talk about it, you need to find a way to get them to someone that can get through to them, whether it's a support group, a school counselor, a friend. Sometimes our parents aren't the safest place to go to. I know for me, like, and I'm not saying that this is, the person that asked that question or whatever, but I knew that my mom could not handle what I was going through emotionally at the time. I knew it would break her. And I felt for some reason a weird responsibility in all of my, 14 years to hold it together for the whole family. Not my responsibility again, but teenagers think they know everything. So I knew that she couldn't handle it. So I tried to speak to a guidance counselor. It helped me a little bit, but even that wasn't enough. So I needed to find my support group. And now I found my people. I found my people, but you're also the parent. Like if you're a parent, sit them down and make them talk. Or if not, send them to therapy. Do everything that you can to make it accessible and just let them know that there's nothing that you can say that's going to make me not love you. There's nothing that you can say. I think about this all the time with Zizi. There's nothing that she could say that's going to blow my mind. I've seen it all. So that's one thing that I'm always going to say to her. There's nothing that you can do to disappoint me. There's nothing that you can do that's going to make me turn my back on you. Because everyone's done dumb things. We've all acted out in one way or another. So we have to love each other and we have to do that in action. And we just have to be open and just stop being the life police.
Ooh, Tara, you about to make me tear up. Just
sorry. I'm really emotional.
No, hey, I know you just had a baby, but I mean, that was powerful even for me. And then the last thing, what's next for you? I know just from your career. I mean, are we going to see you doing any more acting? Are you doing another TED Talk?
Lord, I don't even know.
Well, you even know, or is it just all about being a mom right now? Are you just focused on
through a wrench in things? And honestly, I do a lot of recovery coaching right now. I try to work for different facilities if I believe in them. I like to get hands-on with clients because at this point in my life, I think I'm more useful in that area. But I'm also a spokesperson. I'm speaking at in Illinois in October, and the public speaking world's reopening again, which is very exciting. And so now I just get to find that balance of like enjoying my wonderful husband, enjoying my beautiful daughter, and also still living in my purpose. I didn't go through all of that for nothing.
You didn't.
The sky's the beginning. The sky's the beginning.
I love that. Tara, this has been such an enlightening conversation. Thank you.
Thank you
for being so open and transparent and vulnerable. And thank you to all of you who've been watching this conversation, who watch it on the replay. And that's going to do it for another edition of Addiction Talk. Good night, everyone.